everybody, I'm Sarah Sant, and today I want to talk about colors and color theory. Now, color theory can be a term that people find intimidating because they think it's something that is really complicated and something that they needed to go to art school to learn, but I want to show you how that's not true, and you can learn a lot about the colors that you have to work with watercolor by doing some different exploratory activities. So we're going to be doing something today that is not only really soothing and a mindful practice, but it's something that gives you a lot of information. So grab your materials and come join me. So today we're going to be making a color wheel. And a color wheel is really fun and soothing to paint. It does not require a lot of knowledge of water control. It has almost no brush stroke technique to it. It's all about learning about the colors that you have and how you can mix them to make some different things and how they relate to one another. You don't even need to use the greatest paper in the world. You could use the backside of a painting that didn't work out for you. Again, because we're looking at color, we're not going to be doing multiple layers on this. This is a great tool to have and set out next to you as you're painting. A great tool for you to keep in front of you until you kind of memorize it and memorize the colors that you have on your palette. The more you get to know the colors that you have and how they'll interact with each other, that can really save you some time as you're painting and have to make those quick decisions of, okay, before this dries, I really need to add in this or that color, and you know exactly what color that needs to be. Getting to know your colors is going to save you some time. It's going to allow you to get a little bit more creative because you're not taking the time to stop and look through what colors work for what technique or what effect you're trying to get. I made a color wheel here to start, and I just want to talk about what we see here. So on the color wheel, we have the colors from red to yellow to blue, all the way back to red. And I labeled the red, the yellow, and the blue and put an asterisk next to them. Those are called primary colors. And primary colors, you cannot mix any colors together to get these colors. So you can't mix two colors together to get a yellow. You can't mix two colors together to get blue or to get red. So if I were to buy 3 paints and only have 3, I would pick a red, a yellow, and a blue. From those 3 colors, you can mix all the other colors. So red and yellow becomes orange. Yellow and blue becomes green. Blue and red become purple. Those are called the secondary colors. You can mix in between them, so you get like this red-orange color or this orange-yellow color. Now we're getting into tertiary colors, and we don't need to worry so much about that. Although it's important to know that you can mix any kind of in-between shade here. It's a spectrum. These are not the only colors in existence. These are just the ones that I have on my palette. In the center of this color wheel, you can see that I've drawn lines between red and green, blue and orange, purple and yellow. And those are called complements. So whatever color is directly across on the color wheel, that's the complementary color. And it's like the opposite color. So if you mix together red and green, you're gonna get brown. Same if you mix purple and yellow, same if you mix blue and orange. That can be helpful to know if you're wanting to make your own brown instead of using something on the tube. It is also helpful to know if you're trying to avoid brown. So if I were going to do a sky, I would not start with purple and go all the way down to yellow, because as I mix that together, that can get muddy. It can get brown. It's also helpful to know because putting 2 complementary colors together near each other can really make them pop and stand out. So if, for instance, I'm painting an orange flower and I really want it to pop off the page, I might put some blue around it, maybe some blue leaves or some blue berries or something like that if I'm using my imagination. Knowing what's across the color wheel is helpful to know in an instant so that you can make those decisions as you're painting. Oh, I want to make this pop. It's yellow. Okay, I'm sticking some purple there. It's also good to know that these primary colors, if I were to draw a line from them, they make a triangle. If you mix these primary colors together, so equal parts red, blue, and yellow, you can get a really pretty gray, maybe even a black. So from red, yellow, and blue, you can create all the colors, and you can create neutrals. You can create browns, you can create grays and blacks. And that's why I would argue it is less important to buy a bunch of different paints, and instead it's more important to learn about the paints that you already have. Now, when I made this first color wheel, I tried not to mix as many colors as I could. So I put down, these are all different colors that I have on my palette. I didn't mix them except for maybe two colors. No, it's these two colors I mixed together because I didn't have colors like that on my palette. And I want to show you how different it can look and how much better and more cohesive it can look if I make a color wheel starting with just 3 colors and not adding any other colors from my palette, but mixing everything, and how unified and cohesive that can look. So that when you go to paint a painting, try not to use 15 different colors that you have. Try to keep it down to 3 or 4 or maybe 5 and see how that feels really unified and tied together. I have a blank color wheel, and this looks more complicated than it is to make. At first when I did this, I tried to trace the circle and then to do math in order to divide it and make all the spacings even, and it was just an absolute headache. And then I realized I could basically just draw a clock. So I traced a circle, and then you need 12 little spaces. So I did noon, 6, 3, and 9. And then I did 1, 2, 4, 5, 7, 8, 10, 11, like a clock. And then I just drew these basic shapes. Don't worry about it looking perfect. It does not need to be perfect. You could draw these shapes. You could just make them as circles or squares. It doesn't matter. Don't let this intimidate you or stop you. I used a Micron pen, and this is because it's water fast, meaning if I put wet paint on it, it's not going to bleed. If you don't have a water fast pen, then just use pencil. Again, just use what you have available to you. Pencil is fine. It's not going to bleed either. And then I'm labeling my colors. So I'm going to put my red here, my yellow here, my blue here. Here's going to be orange, green, and purple, my secondary colors. I'm only using one brush. I'm using a number 8 round. You can use any brush you have available to you. It really doesn't matter. If it's very, very small, it might be frustrating to try to fill everything in, but as long as you have just a basic brush, this should work fine. Now, the colors that I'm going to use today are not perfect, true primary colors. I don't have a perfect, true red because I don't use that color very much. I mix a lot to make more roses or more oranges, but I'm using what I have. I'm getting the closest thing I can to red, closest thing I can to yellow, and the closest thing I can to blue. And then I'll be mixing it to show how we can get really beautiful colors starting with just these 3. I'm gonna start with my yellow because that's the lightest color, and I don't want dark water or anything to interfere with that yellow. And I'm gonna be using Hansa Yellow Light. I dipped my brush in water first, and then I'm going onto that color to grab some of that pure yellow. It doesn't need to be too watery. I'm trying to get a nice, vibrant, concentrated mix there. I'm filling it in. I'm not worrying about coloring inside the lines very much. Again, this is not about perfect technique. This is not about style. This is about learning about the colors on your palette. And it's just really comforting and soothing to do. It's a mindful activity. There's my yellow, rinsing that off completely in my water. And now I'm gonna grab Quinacridone Red. Closest thing I have to red, although it's a little bit more pinky. I really love this color. Use whatever you have. Rinsing that off. I have a couple of blues I could choose from, but one of my favorite blues is called Prussian Blue. Again, I'm rinsing off, grabbing water on my brush, and really getting a heavy, concentrated mixture of water and paint. Now what I'm going to do is mix in equal parts red and yellow into this orange so we can get a really nice solid orange using just these two colors. I'm gonna mix it right on the paper. You could mix right here on your palette. I would not go out and buy a fancy palette. I would honestly, I use my husband's plates from college. They're porcelain. Porcelain, I would argue, is the best material, better than plastic to use for a palette, which is why I bought a porcelain one, but you do not need to do that. You can just use a plate. You could mix it on the plate and then set the orange down, but I'm just gonna do it right here in the area. I'm trying to get a lot of yellow there because I know the red is gonna dominate it, and I want it to be kind of equal parts of both. See, the red is already taking over. That poor yellow. This is almost like a rusty orange, which is really pretty. I can foresee using that color in autumn landscapes for trees or foliage. I'm gonna add in a little bit more yellow because this looks more like red orange than a true orange. That's better. See how I'm not worried so much about brushwork or technique or water control. I'm just trying to mix the colors. I am gonna mix some of that color on the palette so that I can make my red-orange color. So if that's my orange, I'm gonna lay some of that down here and mix it with the red to get my red-orange. Red-orange is one of my favorite colors when I was a teenager, so my parents let us decorate our rooms however we wanted. So I bought some really intense red-orange paint and painted the entire room that color. And I think everyone was a little bit like, are you sure you want to paint the whole thing that color? And I was sure, and I loved it. I think it'll probably get painted over. I think it's a little intense, but I liked it. There's my red-orange. I'll lift up some of this orange. It's really dark. That's perfect. I'm gonna do the same process between the orange and the yellow. What I'm learning about this orange when I mix these two primary colors is that it's a very autumnal, almost like squash color. So in the future, if I'm painting something and I want to achieve that kind of tone or that kind of color, I know what two primary colors to use. I don't need to go out and buy a squash orange. I can make it. So I put down some of that orange and now I'm adding some yellow to it. It's an orangey yellow color. All right, I'm moving on to green. I'm gonna clean off my palette and use that area again, just with some paper towel. I'm gonna start with my yellow. Set that down and grab my Prussian Blue. I really love the color that Prussian Blue makes when you mix it with yellows. It's a really just rich, really bright and bold green. I really like using Prussian Blue if I'm doing spring or summer plants. I'm dipping back into my yellow, which is creating a lot of green in that yellow pan, which I'll just wash out later. I try to keep my yellows really clean because they can get taken over immediately by the other colors. Painting outside the lines. Now I'm going to use some of that green and mix in a lot more of the yellow to make that yellow-green color. Very springy. I'm actually enjoying mixing it on the palette rather than on the paper. That's just preference. Do what you want. And the same way towards the blue, I'm going to mix that green in with a lot more blue. It's really pretty. Maybe a little bit more blue. Okay, I'm gonna finish up with the purples and I'm gonna turn it so that my sleeve isn't going into the different colors. Turning it upside down. I have my Prussian Blue, I have my Quinacridone Red. And I'm gonna be mixing my purple up here. Start with the red, grab some blue. Based on how much red or blue you make, you can get a really reddy purple or a really bluey purple extremely easily. And that's also good to know what sort of concentration you need or what ratio you need of each to get what kind of purple you want. I'm trying to get like straight down the middle. I might need a little bit more red. That Prussian Blue really takes over. Same as with the other colors, I'm gonna add in a lot of red to make more of a reddy purple for my tertiary color. It's really nice. I could see using that if you want like a plum color or for berries. And finally, adding a lot of blue. I'm gonna let that dry, and then we're gonna take a look at the different colors we could achieve. Okay, here's the original color wheel I showed at the beginning of this video. And here's the one I just finished. This one feels so much more cohesive and all the colors feel related, and that's because we mixed them from only 3 colors. This one does not all feel cohesive and related because I tried to grab just as many random colors as I had on my palette. I would try this activity with any combination of 3 different primary-ish colors. And I say primary-ish because none of these are perfect, true primary colors. I would even, as long as anything is kind of red, kind of yellow, and kind of blue, I would try it out and see what color combinations you could get because it might surprise you. And I actually tried it out while this was drying, and I used 3 random colors that happened to be some of my favorites, but I would never consider them primary colors. But they are, one's more pinky, one is more peachy, and one is kind of blue. So I used the colors Quinacridone Magenta, Naples Yellow, and Lunar Blue. And none of these are even close to being primary colors, but I still did the color wheel to a much less detailed degree. And as I mix them together, it is so interesting to see how the Naples Yellow acts as a yellow and how the Lunar Blue granulates a lot. It gets a lot of those different textures and pigments. And I actually really love this color palette. I'm really loving the oranges that it creates. I love the kind of sagey colors it gets. Now, it's absolutely not a true color wheel, but it is great information for me to know that when I put these colors together, I can get something really interesting. I would encourage you to try this with any combinations of 3 colors that you have that are reddish, yellowish, and bluish. Now, the final thing I want to show you, I had told you earlier that complementary colors can make a brown, and mixing the 3 primary colors together in equal parts can make a gray or a black. So I want to show you that here. I'm going to use the green and the red to make a brown. I have my green right here. I just added a little bit more of that Hansa yellow light to it. And I'm going to put in that Quinacridone Red. And I'm going to have to monitor, is this too green? Is this too red? Do I need to mix more of one or the other in? Right here, I would look at it and start to get scared and say, uh-oh, I just messed everything up. Just wait. Just hold on. This so far looks like it's going to be very red for a brown. It's actually pretty nice. It is more red for a neutral. If I made a little bit more of that green, made it a little bit greener, now we have a different brown. That's a brown that I could use instead of having to go out and buy a totally unrelated brown. I'm making it from the colors that I'm already using on my painting. That makes it feel more unified. I want to show you a gray. So let's try to get I'm going to try to get relatively equal parts yellow, blue, and red. There's my yellow. There's my blue. There's my red. I added way too much red. That's okay. Takes a little bit of patience, a little bit of observation to know how much of each you need to mix. So this is looking pretty bluey, greeny, so I'm going to add a little bit more red Don't worry about using up too much of your paint or filling your whole plate with paint. That's cool. This is looking kind of purple. I'm gonna use just a tiny bit more of the complement of purple, which is yellow. That may have been too much. We're almost getting there. I'm gonna add a little bit more of the red and then probably a little bit more blue. There we go. And that's a really nice gray. I would suggest using the complementary colors if you want to dull down a color, using its complement instead of just adding in Payne's gray or black. And the reason for that is that by adding in more color to dull it down, you aren't losing any of the pigment. If you add in black, you're dulling it down by losing the pigment, and so it's less of a rich color. If you dull it down by adding its complement, you're adding more color. So here, I have made a gray by using 3 primary colors, and that's actually a really pretty gray. Maybe I'll just fill up the whole paper with it. And so it's still rich. It's kind of a warm gray. I wouldn't use this necessarily for like an ocean gray. Maybe more for stones or for earth. But I didn't need to go out and buy a random gray. I'm using what I already have. I really want to encourage you to try using fewer colors and mix instead of buying 50 different colors. I hope you try this out. I hope you try out a color wheel and find that you can learn a lot about your palette. Let me know what interesting color combinations you come up with, and we'll see you next time.